Hello and welcome to the second episode of Chai na AI, where we have AI conversations built in Africa and look to make AI practical, one conversation at a time. This is our second episode, and I'm really, really excited because we have a great guest for today, Mutembei Kariuki. You'll get to hear more about him and what he's doing with AI, some really cool stuff. He's a founder from Fastagger, but more on that in a second. In the previous episode, which was our first episode, and really glad that you're joining us for the second episode. We introduced the podcast, what the podcast is all about, and we say that we're just trying to take the AI potential you hear about every single day and try to make it the reality for you, try to make it practical for you. I introduce myself and why I'm doing this podcast. I'm not going to speak about that. If you want to watch that episode, you can click on the link and you'll be able to view that. But some of the key things that we discussed, which I thought were interesting, is we spoke about how to think about AI so that you can be able to use it really well. We spoke about the idea that AI is not a software. Yeah? It's not deterministic. It's something that you have to work with and you have to train. You have to think about it as maybe an intern that's really sharp, that you need to train to understand your context, to be able to answer your questions much better, and so forth. We also discussed a bit about prompting, and we spoke about how it's that it's very important for you to think about how to prompt AI so that it gives you the right kind of results. We mentioned that AI does not know who you are. So when you ask a question on ChatGPT, on Claude, whatever tool that you're using, it doesn't know whether you're a kindergarten child, doesn't know whether you're a neurosurgeon. And so you have to give it the kind of context so that it understands who you are and the kind of answer you want AI to be able to give you. We also discussed the different use cases. At least I shared some of the use cases that I use AI for, and I hope you found that inspirational. And we finished with this idea that AI has we've not really tested the limits of how you can use AI. And so if you just spend enough time just trying to push the boundaries, you will realize that there's so much you can do with AI. But of course, within the barriers that we spoke about, the 10, 80, 10. 10 being that you query really well, the first 10%, you really query really well. And then the 80%, you allow AI to do some of the heavy lifting. In this case, the thinking will be giving you options, analyzing whatever you want to analyze. But then very important, you remember the last 10%, that AI can hallucinate. AI can give you some false responses. And so you have to spend some time to then take the 80% that AI has worked on to finalize, to make it whatever you want it to be in this case. So there has to be the final touch that you put in this case. Of course, it won't always be 10, 80, 10. It might be that you're doing 20, 60, 20 in this case, but the whole idea is just to remember that you need to have a really good prompt. You need to allow AI to do its thing. And then finally, your part comes in. So if you want to learn more about that, of course, just go back to the previous episode and you can listen into that. So I'm really happy today that we've been able to get Mutembei Kariuki as our second guest, or not our second guest, our first guest, because I was the first guest in this case, and I'm the host. So it's our first guest for this episode. So Mutembei is a co-founder at Fastagger. And if you speak about AI in Kenya, Fastagger always pops up. Mutembei's name always pops up. He's probably the first person who started telling me about AI and investing in AI. And at that point, I don't think ChatGPT was as big as it is, Claude and so forth. So he really just has started with this when AI was not in the headlines to now where AI is the real. So Mutembei, thank you so much for joining us for today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for hosting me. It's a pleasure. It's always an honor. Great to be here. So looking forward to, unfortunately, I don't have any chai here to be drinking, but excited to be having these conversations. And it's a global thing right now. And yeah, looking forward to answering the questions and just get into a conversation as we see. Yeah,
okay,
with
thanks,
all the best
Mutembei.
conversations around chai.
Yeah, I think next time I'm going to make sure that whenever a guest comes in, they have to have chai. And if they don't have their chai, even if we have to sort of export it to them, we'll get it to them so that we can have the conversation over tea. I have my tea next to me. This is my mug right here.
Yeah.
So we'll just launch him. So Mutembei, I've not done justice to your introduction, but I've just mentioned a few things. So maybe you can just start by just telling us more about your background, what Fast is doing, what you're up to, what is interesting at the moment before we move to the actual conversation about what we want to have, the actual conversation we want to have today.
Okay. So yes, as I said, Mutembei Kariuki is my name, co-founder and CEO of Fastagger. Essentially, we're focused on democratizing AI, getting embodied AI. So this is AI that moves from the cloud, where a lot of these models are most of the time, to actually closer to where the data is. That is on the edge and on objects, whether it's on your a phone, whether it's on a machine, and on sensors. We're building the infrastructure around that. My background is, of course, I would say that I got curious about AI way back before I knew what it was as it is today. And this was, ironically, when I was 11, I encountered Eliza, which was one of the first chatbots that was ever developed by an MIT professor back in the 1960s. So, I just found it on one of these old scrap computers. I think it was a compact Pentium 1. And there's this file I found, and I opened the text box, and, as I'm typing in there, it says, hi, I'm Eliza. And I say, hi, I'm Mutembei. And then, nice to meet you, Mutembei. And it was designed, by this professor at MIT in the 60s to be like a psychologist. And, back then, of course, we didn't have the amount of compute power and the mechanisms to train models of the scale that we are with all the data that we have. We hadn't produced all the amount of data, so it was a very rudimentary type of chatbot. And now you can see all the way to where we are today. And it was always about like next text, prediction, which is similar to part of what we are today, but of course, LLMs are a completely different level in terms of scale. And then, my curiosity went more on the scientific academic side of things. Eventually, I did get a master's in Japan in information systems, and that's where I spent actually quite a bit of time, also going on to factory floors, Toyota factories, and then also traveling to China and seeing, what they're doing there. The maker space, robotics, and applying AI in other ways. So mine has been more of looking at AI holistically rather than, the chatbots. There's just so many other things. There's spatial, or when you're talking about satellites, imagery and data, if you're talking about other sensory data, if you're talking about building data sets. So it's been very wide because AI overall is quite big. And then you have machine learning in there, and then you eventually have deep learning and what you have now with. And then I also got very much interested in some of the amazing icons in the AI space, like Fei Fei Li in our book. I think she has her book called What I See. And I talk about how work there and world models. So, and as I said, one of the things that I experienced in Japan is that I saw that the world was going to be completely transformed. This is about 10 to 12 years ago, right? While I was doing my master's, and that's the time that DeepMind came up with AlphaGo, which won the Go, the best person in the world at the game of Go, using things such as reinforcement learning, where the model was just training itself, playing millions and millions of billions of games by itself, and then getting better at that. Because the methods of doing very obvious, like, showing its examples. So that got me to realize that that plus also seeing how on industrial scale, I think Japan at that point was the country with the most robots in the manufacturing space in factories, and seeing that the realization that I had there is that, being back from home in Kenya, where everybody was talking about the continent being able to develop the way China developed by labor, working in factories, and industrializing that way. And I realized with robotics and AI, that was not going to happen, because robotics and AI was going to make it possible to do manufacturing where you are without having a lot of cheap labor. And because right now in China, you have the movement of dark factories where they actually don't need power or lights on, because there are no humans there, because the machines are just working by themselves, right? And, the idea that we had said that, oh, we'll follow the way of Asia, the Asian tigers of what we'll do manufacturing for the world because we'll give it cheaper. That's not going to happen, right? Because now you have robotics, which makes it much, much, much easier to do production wherever you are, whether it's Europe, the US, or China, and keep it there at a good cost. And so it got me thinking, then, the continent is going to be completely left behind. And so what can we do? How can the continent itself harness AI do better itself in solving a lot of the challenges that we have, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in so many things, like, Google DeepMind were able to, I think, find 200 different proteins structures, and that has actually been one of the things that we're able to do is actually have find some cures for things such as malaria, right? Based off of some of that work and a lot of other things. And so there's a lot of this opportunity for AI to be able to work magnitudes of permutations of looking at problems. And I know
I'm really loving.
Yeah.
No, you're not. I'm just loving this, and there's so many tangents I could take the conversation on. So our typical listener, at least we hope, who's listening in this case, they hear you speaking about the 200 odd proteins that can be used to figure out the cure for malaria or whatever it is. They hear you talking about the robotics in China, which can work at night or even in Europe and so forth. And you know what they do? They use AI for every single day. They're probably using it just to draft emails. And they're asking themselves, how do I move from, drafting emails with AI, or really generating, using, the 80-20 rule, right? Generating the 80% using 20% of my prompts in this case. And I'm really happy we're having this conversation. So maybe before we delve into this, because I know we can really jump into this conversation here, I want to ask you some practical questions, first of all. You use AI, and I really love what you mentioned that you started, I think we spoke about Eliza, which is pre-2000, right? I would imagine. I don't think it was...
Yeah. I think I passed in class. That was 90,
Wow.
96.
I was joking in the first episode, and I was saying that my first prompt was in 2023, January. So you can tell how late I am in the AI game.
Yeah, of course.
So it's this case, which made it more usable. So maybe just some practical questions, just for you first, just to get us started. Most people want to, when people ask me about AI, they ask me, what are one or two practical use cases I use AI for outside of Fastagger first, and then we'll jump to Fastagger. What are one or two practical use cases?
Oh, I mean, I pretty much use the models in a lot of my own thought processes. So instead of going to Google for a lot of things these days, I will go to, well, for Google, I'll go to Gemini or Colord. And even the way I structure my prompts is I'll literally ask, one of the models to come up with a good prompt for me, and then I'll use it on another model, and then I will get it to, go back and check the results of the other ones. I usually I play around with them that way. So I use it a lot of times for a lot of what would be the initial brainstorming. So I use it a lot as a brainstorming partner, right? In terms of looking at ideas about, okay, what about this? What about this aspect of something? And then for structuring things. But also I've realized that it is good not to depend on it. So I will spend a lot of time mind mapping by myself, and then now have those conversations with it, because a lot of models can be very psychopathic. They will be always like cheering you on and saying, yes, and that's the way, and things like that. So just to also stay away from that, I'll also do things by myself and read by myself. So I use it a lot for really brainstorming a lot. And then I use it a lot to help with coding, right? There's just not enough time to do coding the way we were doing it before. And anyway, if you are a developer back in the day, you'd always go to Stack Overflow, and that's where you'd probably copy a lot of code and then put it there. But now, it can just pretty much come up with all the Python script here, and it's come up with, or if you need to do it in TypeScript or something else, it will be able to do that for you. That's another thing, like troubleshooting while coding and even building things up themselves. I use it a lot for prototyping, coming up with something really quickly and then seeing whether it works. Or that's definitely something. I also use it in terms of, so if I know a certain framework of doing something like negotiation, so I'll say, hey, I'm trying to negotiate with a certain prospect. So I ask it, act as if you are Chris Voss from his book Negotiating, and then structure. And this is the email that I was going to send. This is the email interaction I've had with the person. Analyze this email and tell me where I am in the negotiation and how I need to structure the next email. So because most of these models are repositories of pretty much, they can crawl the web and see, okay, what does Chris Voss? So Chris Voss is this like former FBI negotiator. So it's a lot of interesting stuff. Or I'll go and say, hey, I'm spending too much time in my system one rather than my system two, as Daniel Kahneman says, right? And I need to be able to make logical decisions. I'm saying like analyze this situation for me based on our system two. And like give me the probabilities of whether I'm actually I'm having any biases or I'm having any issues with the way I'm thinking. And so I'll use it a lot in terms of almost as an advisory council of taking sort of these world experts in different things and analyzing things that I'm saying. I've never been to YC, so I'll just say, hey, act as if you're Paul Graham and then analyze this for me, right? And you get that. So yeah, I end up using it in that way because it has all that data from all this stuff, and I can get that. So that's one of the most practical ways I use it, like more of like a council of different ways of looking at things, going through negotiations, using world class or world class things. So now I literally have every advisor, world class advisor you would be able to have. And then for coding a lot, right? Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and absolutely. I like that. One of the use cases I use, which I got from one of the podcasts I listened to, is this idea where you create an advisory board where you pick any of the top thinkers that you really like and you want to get insights from, and you just literally go and I did this was an interesting use case. So I went to Notebook LM and so like just told first of all, I think I went online first and just asked for sort of like the top links about any podcast they've done, YouTube links, and so forth. And then I got all those into Notebook and told it to distill their key thoughts, how they think, and how they would be how they would be like advisors in a board. And then I took that and I added it into ChatGPT for each of the different guys I thought I wanted to get some inspiration from. And I call those my advisory board. And so every so often now, when I need sort of like to get some advice, I would just go in there and just say, hey, I need some advice on 1, 2, 3. And each of them will sort of like give me their thoughts. And then I'll look at that and be like, okay, interesting. Then I'll pick whatever I want to do. So I like that use case quite a bit. But there's something you mentioned I want to just jump into, which is this idea of AI can be quite sycophantic, right?
Yeah.
Where it's always just cheering you on and so forth. Are there ways you found of making it more real so that it's not always just cheering you on or just being real with you? How do you do that? How do you,
there are prompts actually that you can do that have been put by people up on LinkedIn and stuff. You just literally write down a prompt like, hey, from now on, I want you to remove all, positive words such as this and this and this of like follow up and you're literally saying, I want you to be more direct, blunt, more, if you don't know something, say that you don't know, like you literally tell us and then say from now on the next conversations, only do this. And so I'll just paste it up of there. And then you realize that, it'll change because these are all nice, good ways, because interestingly, you'll find that the different frontier model labs right now, what they're doing is they're hiring a lot of communication English majors, right? It's interesting, right? So to help them make it AI have like sort of some personalities that can connect with people. Because if you look at the way people have been using it, there's the data now that says like a lot of people actually are using the AI chatbots. I think we need to always be able to tell like AI is not just the chatbots and the are using them for personal, advisory and things like that. So to make them more personable, and that's why you find that they can be a bit too encouraging and psychophantic and things like that. But then you can now switch in prompts to just say like, okay, I want you to be direct, from now on, from the next, and then because they'll follow whatever it is that you ask them and how to do them, and then actually just telling them to tell you that they don't know, they actually don't know something.
Because I always find it interesting, especially with the hallucination element, right? Will the AI, if you tell it, if you don't know, please let me know, will it actually tell you it doesn't know, especially when it's still hallucinating, because it can still hallucinate?
Yeah, so there's a really good video recently by some of the team at Anthropic, who are the teams who applied AI on how best to prompt and what to use. And of course, these are models making a lot of connections and they're not perfect and they're trying to figure things out. And, they're predicting the next word and they have this whole database and making connections. So their hallucination at the moment is not going away completely just because of the real distraction, but you can't really reduce it also because of the way you prompt and you be more specific about how you prompt, right? By giving it, how do you want it? You start with like, how do you want it to act? Like, what, personal, what objective do you have for it? So first you start ideally with, act as a, such a such, then objective, and then, particular
And
things to
actually,
do, and then
yeah.
eventually that's when it comes. And that reduces its ability to hallucinate, because sometimes it's just that it's not understanding really well what you're asking it to do. It predicts so it predicts what you would have wanted as an outcome.
And actually, we in the previous episode we spoke about the best prompting. This idea of context, output, guardrails, and we spoke about a more complex one, the rocket one: a role, objective, context, key constraints, examples, then target output.
Yeah.
And those I think
Yeah.
from that perspective. But I like that idea of just giving it context so that so that it gives you the answer they're looking for.
Yeah.
So this is supposed to be 30 minutes. We're already in the final stretch. We have 10 more minutes, and I want to make sure we cover some more ground. So first of all, you mentioned what Fast does, but I don't think you contextualize. I want you to contextualize that for the listener, so that if they want to get in touch with you, they're able to do that. So give us a use case in terms of what Fast has done or what Fast is trying to do that is practical, that someone can reach out to you and tell you, hey, we need you to solve this kind of problem for us.
Yeah. So right now, what we've been majorly doing in the context of the continent, right? Because we know that there are a lot of challenges with being able to, for the majority of the population. So, for example, right now, let's take Kenya or Nigeria as an example. Kenya has about, 20, let's say 40% internet penetration in the country, right? So we are about, let's say, 60 million people. So that would lead us to having about, let's say, 25 million people who have access to internet, right? And then of those, we're saying that in a 3-month period, most of them will use internet at least once, only once, right? But they have devices, and because data is expensive on your devices, you're not accessing it as much. And we know these days, like if you go and ask AI a question, the amount of data it will grab to be able to answer that question is a lot. So people being able to access and use at a scale, right, is quite a lot. So what we do essentially is we help to get some of these models, they're becoming smaller and smaller, and we build an infrastructure where you can actually be able to take some of these models and then get them to work on, an Infinix phone or a Techno phone, where now you can be able to, let's say you're a small business and you have your M-Pesa statement, and you want to understand who are your top customers, how much are you making from each customer, do you have 150 customers? You're being asked by someone who you're going for to get a loan from, like, how many customers do you actually have every month? How much are you making from them? What's the average you're making for them? And you're like, oh, you have to go and try to write every SMS, of a transaction you've had. And now you can just get your PDF, and then you can upload it one of the models, and then be able to pretty much be given an analysis and have some business intelligence. And so that's one of the use cases that we've used the technology we're able to have to somehow, compress some of these models and put them on device. We have a product with Safaricom, on the Safaricom M-Pesa business super app called Aoni, which is essentially that, where you can just download your M-Pesa statement and upload it onto Aoni, and then it will give you some business intelligence, right? And, it will get better as we go. We have some other solutions that we have, we're working with Microsoft on. You can find them on Microsoft Azure, where you can actually be able to, if you're a company that has a lot of personnel, and you need to be able to communicate with them for clock in, clock out. Maybe they're in the field, and you don't have a whole call center where you can call everyone and check whether they are arrived at their position. Let's say you have guards, you're a guard company, and so you can easily be able to use this tool to, like, this AI now simultaneously communicates with everybody. Or if you have 1,000, 2,000, 100,000 people at the same time, and check in with them and collect information, and then give your operations team, like, oh, this is where all our talent is, this is where person hasn't come in, this person, we need to replace this person, right? So those are some of the solutions that we've created where it works with SMS. So it's really, how do you deploy AI in areas of low power, of constraints, really. So that's where we've built a lot of our expertise and be able to run AI on these devices that are not very powerful.
I know
Yeah.
what I like about what you're saying is because I was having a conversation recently with one of my teammates in the office, and they're saying that all of us, this idea of going to ChatGPT and querying and understanding the rocket way of querying or cog, as we just mentioned right now, it's almost like we're teaching people new skills, right? And at the end of the day, what someone wants is not to take the M-Pesa statement and to tell, I don't know, ChatGPT or whatever it is, assume you're a top analyst at BCG, you've been given these, M-Pesa statement to analyze. Please analyze as follows. Give it to me in PowerPoint. The whole query and so forth. What someone wants is just to drop this thing.
Only.
AUN
Only.
at
Only. Which is Swahili for assistant. Yeah.
Yes, drop it with to Aoni, and then Aoni does the assignment for you. And so what I liked about that conversation was this idea that over time, while we want everybody to be a power user, where they're able to do all this querying, if we go back to the the normal curve, right, you'd realize that the majority of the people want these kinds of solutions that just solve the problem they want. They don't want to learn how to do all these different things, but there's of course those guys on the edges who want to spend much more time. So really exciting. And what we'll do is that we'll take links to some of those products that you put out and share them as part of this podcast, so that if someone wants to interact with that, they can interact with that. We're now on the home stretch, and we always have our 3 signature questions. And I want to jump to those. Probably have to invite you again because I feel like we've scratched the surface literally. So let me start with the first one. First signature question is, what's one AI habit that helps you save time every single day?
Emails. So the auto generation, and this I don't have to go and do something outside of Gmail. It's literally, it usually generates like the email replies for me. So that really saves a lot of time for me. And so yeah, that's the one biggest part that helpful. Yeah.
And let me ask, have you had to train your Gmail to know how to respond? Because I find that at times, you'll get a response from AI and you look at it and be like, do I edit or do I start writing my own email?
No, I think for me is because it already had access to all my emails. I gave it some access, and so it pretty much knows me and how I would usually reply right now. So you can give permissions for it to look into all your emails, and that's really good within the Gmail ecosystem, because especially, so there was a time I tried, I actually spent some money and actually went for the Google AI Raw version, which actually had access to everything, all my G Suite, and I would actually be able to make things a lot easier for me, maybe when I'm querying or doing anything. And that helps a lot. Yeah.
I feel like maybe we should just spend 30 seconds on the risks, from an AI perspective, when you give it all the data and then one day it turns rogue, and I don't know, there's all these movies you watch where AI has turned rogue. So just 1 minute, what do you think about that? And how comfortable are you sharing all that level of access?
So our data is already there. It's already out there. It's already being used to train a lot of these models and things like that. I would not be too concerned about AI taking over the world. I am more concerned a lot of times about the small mistakes that it could do, like with misinformation and directing people to the wrong direction, rather than that, like giving you the wrong information. And these are the LLMs, but I think right now, as we are moving towards a world of agents, right? So now we've moved away from just you querying things to generating agents which now interact with each other. Actually, one of the biggest risks I see is in the cybersecurity space, where now that actually they're saying a lot of the content online and the traffic is actually agents, right? Having conversations with each other. And it's going to become more and more like that, where literally, you will not be going on Amazon. Your agent will be going onto the Carrefour app and buying for you what you need every month and paying the Carrefour agent. So like there literally almost be no humans. So I see a risk where an agent that is built by someone who's malicious will put in will end up convincing other agents to do some, crazy stuff, or like to infect other machines. And so that means like there's a huge cybersecurity risk in that, which could cascade and affect, economics and other things. And also like our overly trusting some of this AI, where it could make a mistake. But of course, there's a lot of work being done around protecting this. So I'm more about the situations where you have too much trust in some of the algorithms, and then you end up arresting someone because it couldn't tell the person, different black people apart, and then so someone gets arrested. And so this has been the case in a number of countries. So those are the risks that I'm more worried about. This ones of like where we trusted these models too much, rather than existential ones of like the end of the world and things like that. That's still quite some distance away, right? Because now you have people like Nikon, we have like Fei Li and everyone who have also shown that there's limitations to LLMs right now. We need all the models. So yeah, that's where I see more of the risk.
Actually, I think there's a sci-fi movie that just came out last year about this guy who's being told, I think the AI decides that he has to prove his innocence to the AI. I think I'm gonna watch that movie.
I watched it recently as well. Yeah. So
Okay.
honestly, it's a tool. It's a tool, and the same way you could use a hammer to hurt someone or to build a really beautiful cabinet for storing your books and knowledge and things like that, then you can also use a hammer to destroy a house, right? So it's very similar. If you have an automated hammer, you could let it could do some things that some damage. So that's how I usually see it. But it's more.
I like that analogy. I like that analogy. Let's move to the second question. Second question is, what's one underrated breakthrough that you've seen in AI that probably people don't know about, people are not talking about enough, that you think is super awesome?
No, I mean, honestly, what Google DeepMind was able to do with the protein folding, like with AlphaFold, like literally coming up with the sequences for almost all known proteins. That is unbelievable because that completely transformed the future of biotech, right? Because you can now come up with new chemicals, new medicines, drug discovery, for so many diseases that, we were like, okay, it's too expensive to even start dealing with that. All those tropical diseases we have in Africa, there's just so much potential that right now everybody, yes, they're really fascinated by these chatbots and what they can do and prompting and stuff. What AlphaFold has opened up for AI in science and biotech, that is and kind of therapies we can eventually do for different cancers and things like that is one thing I think is underrated and not enough people have seen what can be done in that space.
Curiosity, this is open source, they put it out, or
no, it's out there. Like there's so many labs who are trying to cooperate with them to do this. So like people at Cambridge or other places can work on can get access to this.
Okay, that's interesting. And then let me move to the last final question, which is, if you had unlimited AI resources, if you had all the energy, you could get all the tokens, what's the problem you'd solve?
I think more efficient manufacturing. Everything we do, your glasses, your earpods, your clothes, everything is in the manufacturing space, right? And that world was opened up to me when I spent time in Japan. I was literally on factory floors and China as well, like seeing that. Just also in Kenya, going out to different places in the industrial area and seeing what's being done there. I think, with unlimited resources, I would really build like the AI native, operating system for factories of the future.
Nice.
Just because no part of the world has been able to advance without good manufacturing. And I think the world saw in COVID how if you don't have manufacturing capacity, you die, literally die, right? We weren't able, like on the continent, people weren't able to get vaccines. Interestingly, I met some people in Germany once who, they make the vials for vaccines, and they didn't even have enough young people in that particular small town anymore. So they had to figure out how to use AI for checking defects on those vials before they can sell them as they produce them. So I think that is where I'd be. I'd be in the manufacturing space because the reality is that the biggest impact is actually going to be in the physical AI, embodied AI space. That is where I'd be. AI in manufacturing and physical.
Wow. Mutembei, I feel like I needed an extra hour with you, but we do need to finish.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us for this second episode. I really hope that at some point we'll come back to you and see how things have gone with Fastagger, whether you've been able to get enough tokens to create manufacturing in the future. Just so you know, the solution I wanted to solve is to remove the biases that exist when capital is flowing from the capital providers to entrepreneurs. If there was a way to sort of like kill that so that if the idea is good, the message that is sent is exactly what's received, I think that would be really awesome.
Yeah.
And so if we match our, you do the manufacturing, I do the capital thing, we have a new world altogether.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
Listener, if you've been listening to us, thank you for joining us also. As mentioned, my call to action for you is please follow the podcast, share with a friend. If you can suggest any guests that you'd like, if you'd like to get in touch with the likes of Mutembei for any advisory help or with myself, please reach out and we'll be able to connect you with the guests that we are hosting or with people that you think can be able to support you. This has been your host, Stephen Gugu for Chai and AI, where we have AI conversations brewed in Africa and look to make AI practical, one conversation at a time. Thank you, and see you in the next one. Mutembei, kwaheri. Thank you so much.